How concerned are you, Sam?
I'm enormously concerned, and I'll tell you why. Because there is literally nothing standing between these people and our shores and our streets. Any one of these people leaving, they were called camps, right? But in actual fact, they were basically prisons. There was soldiers around the outside from various rebel factions and or the Syrian government keeping these incredibly dangerous people in there. All of that is broken down, and they are now able to walk across land, sea, all the way here into the UK, smuggle themselves across in a boat, and they will be here. And once they're here, we know we will never, ever, ever get rid of these people.
We'll give them a nice hotel room, 3 meals a day.
And look, the same applies to Miss Begum, right? Yeah. Shamima Begum can now, we presume, walk out of the camp, our rural camp out there in Syria that we know that she's been stuck in for the past few years. If she's smart enough to pay a people smuggler to get her across Europe...
She was smart enough as a teenage girl to get to Syria. Pretty sure she could manage it as a 25-year-old.
And I'll tell you the truth, it was probably harder for her to get out of this country and into Syria than it is to smuggle herself back into our country. That is how porous our borders are. And look, she'll be back here. And despite the fact we stripped her of her citizenship, despite the fact that MI5 have told us that she was stitching suicide vests together, despite the fact that she's made it very clear she hates this country and everything we stand for, she will be here, she will be stuck, she will be here at our expense, we'll be paying for it, and we will never, ever, ever get rid of her. Citizenship be damned.
And she will be free. My argument has always been she was British now. She renounced her British citizenship. I would rather she was here and behind bars and not a threat to other people. Again, the security services reckon she is absolutely a threat to this country. She is totally and utterly radicalised. Do not believe all the sort of, I'm looking so Western now. No, she did not think she'd done anything wrong. She thought everything was worth it when she was first found in that camp. Now, she is a danger to us. The reality is, if she spent even 2 months behind bars here, you know, who are we kidding? She's going to be free on our street. She's a danger. We cannot have her back in this country. But this is the thing. This Sir Alex Dearlove is the former MI6 chief. Apologies, Sir Alex Younger, apologies, MI6 chief. And he was in charge of MI6, you know, around the time all this, the chaos was happening. You know, he's talking about, you know, there are thousands of jihadis. At least 70 Brits are being held in these camps. 15 men, jihadi fighters, 20 of their wives, the jihadi brides, but also 40 children. Now, there's been a lot of sympathy for the children. Again, I'm really sorry the kids have been brought up in these circumstances, but do I want a load of radicalised kids, the children of Islamic radicals? No, I don't. Sorry. No, I'm sorry. I just don't. We've got to prioritise our country. We've already got a huge number of Syrian asylum seekers. 1 in 6 of all those granted refugee status in this country are Syrian. Pretty much a shoo-in. You know, you really have to do something very wrong for you to not get your... Once you've actually got your asylum application process, not to get that. But we've had 6,500 Syrians claiming asylum almost entirely. Those people who come over on those Channel boat crossings. There's some deal going on with the Germans about supplying of boats and things. No chance at all that's going to be stopped. And this is the interesting thing. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, yesterday, he was referring to Bashar al-Assad as the rat of Damascus, fleeing to Moscow with his tail between his legs and all of that. But he was talking about how, you know, we've got people who are, you know, going to be, you know, many Syrians saying they want to go back to Syria. But, you know, if it all goes horribly wrong, as, let's face it, most of us suspect it will, because we are talking about this rebel group being effectively, you know, they're jihadists. They may not be quite ISIS or Al-Qaeda, but they're jihadists. Then we'll see that flow back again. And there's just no evidence that Europe is able to withstand, you know, hordes of people arriving from Syria. I mean, and we've got bad dealings with Erdogan in Turkey. He's kept millions in Syria in return for billions and billions in aid from the West. I mean, this is going to be an absolute abject disaster. People cheering on the streets and everyone saying, isn't it wonderful that Assad's gone? But the reality is it could be an awful lot worse very, very soon.
Do you know what? I actually don't agree. I think it's just going to be the same old, same old. We've had all of these people coming across claiming they're Syrians. By the way, we've got no idea how many of them actually are Syrians or aren't Syrians. But if you claim...
There are 3 or 4 countries, Afghanistan, Syria, you're going to be allowed to stay.
You get 99% acceptance rates. So they've all been saying they're democracy activists. I guarantee they're now all going to say they're Christian converts, they're gay or whatever, so they still can't go back. people are not coming across, in my view, and this is a controversial opinion, but people are not coming across because of danger or war or anything else. They're coming across, and I don't blame them for this, because it's a good life in the UK, because you're off to a better future, because you're going to earn quite a bit more money. And that's a perfectly legitimate opinion. But
However,
we cannot afford to consume half of the Arab world plus Africa. We just can't, right?
Nope.
30% of men on the African continent of the relevant age bracket say they want to come to the UK or come to the Western world. There's no way we could absorb that. It's just ridiculous. So what I think is we're going to continue to see what Douglas Murray calls the slow death of Europe, in which millions upon millions of people continue to gradually but steadily but consistently make their way over to our shores, and our broken system won't be able to deal with the fact that we're looking at a systemic fraud.
And then we end up with, I mean, again, listen, things that people don't like to talk about, but then we end up with an MP in the House of Commons calling on the Prime Minister to bring in a blasphemy law, and we have police across the country, it's not on Twitter, on X, posting notices about how, if you're going to your Christmas market, do be careful. We'll be there to keep you safe. What are we being careful for? What is the threat? Why are there bollards everywhere? What is the threat we're worried about? What is it? Can anyone remember what that threat is? Because I don't remember this being an issue, 20 years ago, even 15 years ago, and suddenly now we need to be protected when we go out Christmas shopping. Why? What's changed? What's happened? Why do we need to be protected going Christmas shopping? Is anyone... Would do call in and let me know, because the police don't want to say anything, the politicians don't want to say anything, and everyone's just going to pretend everything's absolutely fine when we have imported a problem in our country. Now, most people who come to this country just want to make a better life for themselves, as you say. But we don't know who people are. We've got no idea. 90% of the people coming on the Channel migrant boats, they throw away their documentation, as you say. Or I'm from Syria. Sure you are. How are we proving this? What are we doing, DNA testing? We don't even check whether or not they're 14 or 24 when they claim to be kids. Yeah, and strangely enough, every time we do the dental checks, a significant percentage of them, at the very least, turn out to be adults of, a young, as Nigel Farage would say, fighting age. And look, that's reality. But these, of course, it's all the pro-democracy activists who are being told, they all just happen to be young men. It just so happens that the most vulnerable people in the Middle East, all of those that are at gravest danger, in most desperate need of our compassion, are men. In their 20s, who happen to have just enough money to pay dangerous criminals to smuggle them into our country. I know. It's an absolute joke, isn't it? I want to know, how concerned are you about this? Because if you're not, wake up. Just wake up. Now, of course, we'll be accused of xenophobia, bigotry, Islamophobia. Every single thing. I'm sorry. This is a third world country. Well, it's certainly been bombed back into the medieval ages by Assad, his awful leader. I would like the people of Syria to live in a free and happy and, inclusive democracy. I'm not optimistic. It's not worked out pretty much anywhere else since the Arab Spring, so I'm not optimistic. But I'm not entirely sure why, when it doesn't work out, it has to become our problem. It does become our problem. We need to guard against it. That's why I'm talking about it now, because we need to talk about it. But I'm not sure that the solution is people just turning up on our shores or turning up across Europe. And it is, as you say, and as Douglas Murray's brilliant book on this issue, we are seeing a cultural sort of annihilation going on in Europe, and our politicians are only just vaguely beginning to wake up to it, simply because voters are saying, no, we're seeing it. You're all living in you've got your chauffeurs and your nice homes and your nice leafy suburbs. You are not living the reality of this. And you're not at the Christmas markets where apparently, we're going to face imminent death at any point. I think a lot of people will be talking about, are we going to get another wave of the attacks we had? We remember back in 2017, we had 3 or 4 in a row, and it really was just like, when is the next bomb going off, or when is the next car going to be driven into people? I just don't think we should be living like this. I don't think we should think this is something that we just put up with and we accept, and yet we import people to this country or allow them to stay in this country, and we don't know who they are and whether or not they could do us wrong. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. What do you make of the Israelis? They've been launching airstrikes on Syrian air bases overnight, but also on basically stockpiled weapons. They say they don't want jihadis to get their hands on them. It's reported now that Israeli tanks are less than 20 miles from the capital, Damascus, in Syria. IDF has denied these claims, but I mean, bearing in mind, looking at the geography, Damascus is in the far southwest of Syria, very close to the Israeli border. But there's no doubt at all, you've got the Turks. In northern Syria, you've got the Iraqis. I mean, there's an awful lot of people with interest in what goes on in Syria right now.
Yeah, well, Israel takes a very straightforward approach, which is it is not prepared to allow events overseas to damage its own national security.
It's mind-blowing. We should think about following this.
And you know what? International law... or contested notions of international law, international human rights arrangements. It hasn't gone and made an application to some body in Strasbourg before it's gone and done this. It said, no. Do you know what? Our first priority is to keep the Israeli people safe.
Yep.
And by damn, we're going to do it. And it's gone there. It's done it. It's bombed first, frankly, and it's asked questions later. But so should it, because it knows it has been living under an existential threat for the entirety of its existence. And that breeds a kind of recognition that this is a very real world with very real bad people that are prepared to do very real things to your citizenry.
Don't make a speech in Parliament and have a little meeting about it, but just deal with it, exactly. Let's talk about another story which has actually been very big over the last 5 days, in New York in particular, the quite clearly sort of targeted assassination, the murder of healthcare chief executive Brian Thompson on the streets of New York. He's the head of the biggest healthcare insurance company in America, United Healthcare. He was shot in the back of the head by a gun with a silencer on the streets of New York. A 5-day manhunt ended yesterday with a 26-year-old Luigi Mangione taken into custody after being spotted by a fellow customer at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania, 280 miles west of New York City. It turns out, this guy, Ivy graduate, very, very intelligent, very successful. He's now apparently everyone's sort of all these mad women online are saying like how hot he is, but apparently a big fan of the Unabomber. It turns out he's kind of disappeared. All his friends haven't been in touch with him for a few months, but suddenly it would appear he is the chief suspect, and as I say, has been charged with murder in this case. Extraordinarily, for obviously a highly intelligent man, found with a weapon that matched the weapon used and casings for the bullets, left a mobile phone, a bottle of water. He's been in places where there's clearly going to be CCTV showing his face. It's almost like, frankly, he wanted to be found, I would suggest. All quite bizarre. But, there's no doubt at all that he's getting quite a lot of support now. There's no one who deserves to be shot dead on the streets like this. But I have to say, the stories we've been hearing about what happens with, with insurance, healthcare in America. The biggest cause of personal bankruptcy is due to health insurance failing and people having to pay healthcare costs. There's an awful lot of sympathy for this man, rather scarily.
Yes, well, there is. Look, I think one of the things we can probably all be grateful for is, despite the NHS being actually a pretty bad system for delivering healthcare, especially compared to our European counterparts, the American system is equally bad, especially if you are on a middle or a lower income.
Oh, if you're rich, it's the best healthcare in the world.
That's
if you're
right.
not, but healthcare in America costs 3 times more percentage of GDP than our healthcare costs do. It's an absurd way.
And you are so dependent on these big corporations like United Healthcare, which arbitrarily deny claims in order to keep their profits up. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm wondering if we're going to have more claims for healthcare in this country, because we all get fat after Christmas. Lots of stuff in the papers about, if you drink too much, how alcohol affects your body. It's a lot of finger wagging. I kind of say, a few years ago, it used to all be like, where can you go to get your festive booze? Now it's all, don't drink too much. God, the misery guts out there. Here's some really bad news. Mince pie prices have jumped by up to 40%. I love this. In a Christmas shopping blow, the headlines say. Turns out, very poor sultana harvest in Turkey, where apparently most sultanas are grown. You learn something new every day. What amazes me is no one's decided to mention Climate change. Surely they could have elbowed that in, couldn't they?
I have a very strict rule, actually. It's 2 mince pies per year.
That's why you're svelte and healthy.
I think any more than that, they get a bit cloyy, a bit saccharine, a bit sickly, and I can't really cope with more.
My mother-in-law
I like them hot,
makes the best mince pies, I have to say. There's always like, do you want me to bring my mince pies? Yes, we want you to bring your mince pies.
Yeah, you want that sort of extra thick, crusty, short crust pastry that only the homemade ones get. The pastry from the shops, actually, I think is what lets them down, really.
Too much sugar.
Too much sugar in the
Your
pastry.
thoughts on mince pies, folks. Let's get to the really, really important stories today.